You're standing on a dry savanna. It's about 1 million years ago. The grass is tall and brittle, the sun is hammering down on the back of your neck, and there is no shade for miles. You've already been walking since before dawn. Your feet are calloused, your throat is dry, and there's no water bottle, no map, no app telling you how many steps you've taken. There's just the horizon, the heat, and the simple, brutal fact that if you stop moving, you don't eat. And here's the part that should mess with you a little. The body you're standing in right now, in the real world, watching this, was built for exactly that day. You are sitting still in a chair that was designed biologically to walk 20 miles. This is the story of why ancient humans walked so far every single day for hundreds of thousands of years. And it's not just a story about exercise. It's a story about how walking didn't just keep our ancestors alive. It built our brains, shaped our bones, redrew the entire map of the planet, and quietly turned a fragile, slow, clawless ape into the most relentless creature this world has ever seen. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. We didn't survive because we were strong. We didn't survive because we were fast. We survived because we would not stop. And the evidence for this is honestly remarkable. So let's get into it. This goes deep. Let's start with the body. Because before we talk about why humans walked 20 miles a day, we have to talk about the fact that we are, anatomically, the weirdest animal on the savannah. Think about it. We're not strong like a chimpanzee, which can casually outmuscle a grown human without trying. We don't have claws. We don't have fangs. We can't climb fast. We can't sprint fast. And a newborn gazelle can outrun an Olympic athlete within hours of being born. By every obvious measure, we should have been lunch. But somewhere around 2 million years ago, our ancestors started changing in a very specific direction. And every single one of those changes points to the same thing: distance. In 2004, two scientists, Dennis Bramble from the University of Utah and Daniel Lieberman from Harvard, published a paper in the journal Nature with a title that sounds almost boring: Endurance Running and the Evolution of Homo. But the idea inside it was anything but boring. They argued that the human body wasn't shaped by walking and running by accident. It was shaped by it on purpose, by evolution, over millions of years. And once you see the list of evidence, you can't unsee it. Start with your butt. Seriously, the gluteus maximus, the biggest muscle in your body, is enormous compared to a chimpanzee's. And it barely does anything when you walk slowly. It fires when you run, when you move with momentum, when you need to keep your trunk from pitching forward over long distances. Then look at the back of your skull. There's a little ligament called the nuchal ligament that stabilizes your head when you move. Chimps don't have it. Horses do. Dogs do. Animals built to move across land have it. We have it too. Look at your legs. Long, spring-loaded tendons, especially the Achilles tendon, which stores and releases energy like a literal elastic band every time your foot hits the ground. Look at your feet. That arch isn't just for show. It's a shock absorber and an energy return system. Look at your inner ear, where there's a structure that helps you keep your balance and your gaze steady while your whole body is bouncing up and down. It's bigger in humans than in our closest relatives. And here's where it gets genuinely insane. Look at your skin. You are essentially a naked sweating machine. Most mammals cool themselves by panting, and panting has a hard limit. You can't pant and run flat out at the same time for very long. But humans? We're covered in millions of sweat glands and almost no fur. We can dump heat continuously while moving for hours. We are one of the best long-distance cooling systems in the entire animal kingdom. Put all of that together, and you don't get an ape that happens to walk. You get a body engineered, from the skull to the toes, for one thing. Going the distance. But here's the question that should be sitting in the back of your mind. Why? Why would evolution invest in all of that? Walking 20 miles a day is expensive. It burns calories. It wears out joints. It costs water you might not be able to replace. Nature does not build extravagant, costly machinery for fun. So what was the payoff? Now let's talk about food, because this is where the whole story turns. For most of our evolutionary history, our ancestors were not living in a grocery store. They were living in a landscape where food was scattered, unpredictable, and constantly on the move. Imagine you're a hunter-gatherer. The berries are ripe over there, maybe a 4-hour walk away. The tubers are buried in a different patch entirely. The animals migrate with the seasons. There's no field of wheat waiting for you. To eat, you have to go and get it, and there is almost never close. This is the foraging life, and it has a built-in tax. The tax is distance. To gather enough calories to feed yourself and your family, you simply had to cover ground, a lot of it. And we're not guessing about this, because there are still people on Earth living something close to this lifestyle, and scientists have studied them very carefully. The Hadza are a group of hunter-gatherers in northern Tanzania, near Lake Eyasi. They don't farm. They don't keep livestock. They get their food the old way, by hunting wild animals and gathering wild plants, honey, berries, and tubers across a dry savanna landscape. And a team of researchers, including Herman Poncer and David Raiklin, spent years measuring exactly how they live and how much energy they burn. What they found is exactly what you'd expect from a body built for distance. Hadza men, out hunting and tracking, regularly walk distances that would make the average office worker weep. The whole group, men and women combined, routinely covers somewhere in the range of several miles to well over 10 miles a day every day, just as the normal cost of staying fed. Not as a workout, not as a New Year's resolution, as life. And here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. When Poncer's team measured how many total calories the Hadza burn in a day, expecting it to be sky high compared to lazy Westerners, the answer that came back in their 2012 study, published in the journal PLOS One, was strange. The Hadza, despite walking constantly and living physically demanding lives, burned roughly the same number of total calories per day as the average sedentary person in America or Europe. Let that sink in for a second. People walking 10 plus miles a day across rough terrain were burning about the same daily energy as someone who drives to work and sits at a desk. This led Poncer to a now famous and controversial idea called the constrained total energy expenditure model. The basic notion is that the human body doesn't just add up calories burned. It budgets. It adapts. If you move more, the body quietly economizes elsewhere, trimming energy spent on other internal processes to keep your total daily burn within a remarkably stable range. Why does that matter for our story? Because it tells you something profound about what we are. We are not built to be efficient sitting still. We are built to be efficient while moving all day. The walking isn't the exception that breaks the budget. The walking is the budget. Our whole metabolism evolved assuming the miles were coming. But here's the thing. Walking to gather plants is one half of the story. The other half is one of the wildest survival strategies in the entire animal kingdom, and it might be the single best argument for why we became long-distance specialists in the first place. Let's talk about how early humans hunted, because it wasn't with speed, and it wasn't with strength. It was with patience and sweat. The idea is called persistence hunting. And once you understand it, you'll never look at a marathon the same way again. Here's how it works. You're a human on the savannah, and you've spotted an antelope. Now that antelope can absolutely outrun you in a sprint. It's not even close. If this were a 100-meter dash, you lose every time, instantly. But you're not going to sprint. You're going to do something much stranger and much more terrifying. You're just going to follow it. You start jogging toward it. It bolts, runs a few hundred meters, and stops to rest because sprinting overheats it fast. But you don't stop. You keep coming. Slow, steady, relentless. So it bolts again and rests again. And you keep coming again and again and again, hour after hour, in the heat of the day, when the sun is at its most punishing. And here's the trap. The beautiful, lethal trap that your naked, sweaty body sets. The antelope is covered in fur, and it cools itself by panting. But it can't pant while it's running, so every time it bolts, it builds up heat it can't get rid of. You, on the other hand, are sweating the entire time, shedding heat continuously as you move. So slowly, over the course of hours and many miles, the animal does something that no predator's teeth or claws could make it do on their own. It overheats. It collapses. It literally cooks itself from the inside while you, calm and dripping, simply walk up to it. You didn't outrun it. You outlasted it. You turned the sun itself into your weapon, and your only requirement was the ability to keep moving for a very, very long time. Now, you might be thinking, that sounds like a nice theory, but did people actually do this? And the answer is yes. In the 1980s and into the 2000s, researchers documented persistence hunting still being practiced by some San hunters in the Kalahari Desert in southern Africa. Anthropologists like Louis Liebenberg actually went out and ran these hunts alongside them in temperatures that could climb past 40 degrees Celsius, chasing animals like kudu across the sand for hours until the animal simply could not continue. It's not a fairy tale. It's a filmed, measured, real thing that human beings can do. And think about what that means. Persistence hunting doesn't reward the strong. It doesn't reward the fast. It rewards the one thing our whole anatomy is screaming about: endurance. The ability to walk and jog mile after mile after mile under a brutal sun without quitting. The hunter who covered the most ground brought home the most meat. And meat, calorie-dense, protein-rich, fat-rich meat, may have been one of the key fuels that let the next big thing happen. Because here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about the brain. The human brain is an absolute energy hog. It makes up about 2% of your body weight, but it gobbles up around 20% of your energy, even when you're just sitting there doing nothing. Building and running a brain this big is metabolically outrageous. You do not get to evolve an organ that expensive on a diet of leaves and luck. You need a steady, rich stream of high-quality calories. And the way our ancestors got those calories was by ranging far and wide, gathering the best plants, and crucially, bringing down animals through the kind of long distance. Sweat-soaked hunting we just talked about. So look at the loop here, because it's gorgeous. Walking long distances let our ancestors gather and hunt better food. Better food fueled bigger brains. Bigger brains made our ancestors smarter trackers, smarter foragers, smarter planners who could read a landscape, remember where the water was, predict where the herds would go, and coordinate as a group. And being smarter made them even better at covering ground efficiently and getting even more food. Each piece fed the next. Movement built the brain, and the brain made us better at moving. And there's an even more beautiful wrinkle in this. Some researchers, including David Raiklin, have explored the link between aerobic activity, the kind of sustained, hours-long movement our ancestors did constantly, and the brain itself. There's a growing body of work suggesting that this kind of endurance activity is tied to the release of certain brain-supporting molecules and to better function in regions involved in memory and navigation. The provocative idea, sometimes called the adaptive capacity model, is that we may have evolved to be smartest while we're moving, that our cognition and our locomotion are wired together because for our ancestors, thinking and traveling were never separate activities. You had to navigate, remember, and plan precisely because you were always on the move. In other words, the reason your brain feels clearer after a long walk might not be a coincidence. It might be a memory written into your biology of a time when walking and thinking were the same survival skill. But here's the thing. We've been talking about walking to eat, walking to hunt, walking to feed a hungry brain. And all of that happened, more or less, within a single landscape. Now I want to zoom way, way out. Because the same relentless legs that chased antelope across the savannah did something almost unbelievable. They carried our species across the entire planet. Let's talk about the Great Human Migration. For most of our deep history, our ancestors lived in Africa. And then, in waves, over tens of thousands of years, groups of early humans began to leave. They didn't have boats for most of this. They didn't have horses, which weren't domesticated until thousands of years later, around 5,000 to 6,000 years ago on the steppes of Central Asia. They didn't have wheels or roads or any of it. They walked. Think about the scale of that. Anatomically modern humans spread out of Africa, and over millennia, their descendants reached the Middle East, then the vast expanse of Asia, then Europe, then Australia, crossing into a continent that required real ingenuity to reach. And eventually, by somewhere around 15,000 years or more ago, human beings walked into the Americas, likely crossing the land bridge of Beringia, where Siberia and Alaska are now separated by water, and then pushing all the way down, generation after generation, until human footprints stretched from the Arctic to the southern tip of South America. There were footprints. By the way, literally, at White Sands in New Mexico, researchers found fossilized human footprints that have been dated. in a study published in the journal Science in 2021, to potentially more than 20,000 years ago, pushing back the timeline of when humans were walking around in North America. Footprints, the most ancient, most human signature there is. A record, frozen in old mud, of someone going somewhere on foot. No single person walked from Africa to Argentina. That's not how it worked. It was generation after generation, each one ranging a little further, following game, following coastlines, following rivers and seasons. Each group nudging the frontier outward by the only means they had, their legs. The same anatomy we've been describing this whole time, the spring-loaded tendons, the heat-dumping skin, the tireless endurance, is the reason our species isn't confined to one valley in East Africa. It's the reason humans live on every continent on Earth. We walked there, all of it. We walked the whole world. And here's a thought that should genuinely stop you in your tracks. Every single one of your ancestors, going back through that entire chain, was someone who could move, someone who could keep up, someone who walked the miles, made the hunt, found the water, crossed the ridge, and lived long enough to pass it on. If even one of them had stopped, had been too slow, too tired, had given up one day too early on one long walk, you would not be here. You exist because an unbroken line of people, stretching back 1,000,000 years, refused to stop walking. So now look at the modern world, and you start to feel the strangeness of it. We built a civilization around 10,000 years ago on the back of agriculture that for the first time let humans stay in one place. We didn't have to chase the food anymore. The food grew where we planted it, and that was a revolution. But it also broke something ancient. For the first time in the entire history of our lineage, you could survive without going the distance. And then we kept going. We invented the wheel, the cart, the horse-drawn carriage, the train, the car, the elevator, the office chair, the couch, and the food delivery app that brings the antelope right to your door. Except now it's a burger, and it took 20 minutes instead of 20 miles. In the space of just a few thousand years, a blink in evolutionary time, we took a creature built to walk 20 miles a day and sat it down. Permanently, that mismatch between the body we still have and the lives we now live might be one of the most important and least appreciated facts about being a modern human. Your heart, your metabolism, your joints, your brain, all of it was tuned over 1,000,000 years for a life of constant, moderate, all-day movement. And we now spend our days almost perfectly still. But here's where I have to stop you, because there's a piece of this story that goes even deeper, and most people have never heard it. We've talked about food and hunting and brains and migration. We've treated walking as a means to an end, a way to get the calories, a way to catch the prey, a way to reach the next valley. But some of the most fascinating new thinking suggests that all that walking did something else to us, something we're only beginning to understand. It didn't just move our bodies. It may have shaped the way we bond, the way we cooperate, the way we form the groups that became tribes, that became villages, that became everything. And for most of human history, the very act of moving together, side by side, mile after mile, may have been quietly building the thing we call being human in the first place.